There we go. Great. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:15 on January 7, 2026, and I'm Barb Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded, and that recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. We'll start with our usual roll call of task force members. Please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Dan Batesy.
Here.
Paul White.
I'm here, although I can't get my camera to work at the moment, but I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay.
Ron Kumitz.
Here.
Morning. And Mike Dunges.
I am here.
Good morning. And let's see, we don't have Jim or Michael yet, and I didn't get responses from them, but we'll watch and see if they might join. Also joining us is Emily Mullaney from Department of Public Safety as our administrative support. And of course, our project management partners, Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate. And it looks like no one from Mission Critical this morning, but we have Dean Gilmore joining us from Addison County. I can't remember exactly what agency you're affiliated with. Dean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Dean Gilmore. I represent Addison County Firefighters Association on the Vermont State Firefighters Association level and on their Governmental Affairs Committee.
Nice to have you join us. And Chris Pedotti, Emergency Communications Director from Department of Public Safety, is here as well. Good morning, Chris.
Morning. Thank you.
All right. That looks like we've got everybody accounted for. So we'll move on to approval of the agenda. The agenda was distributed to task force members. It's also available on the webpage. Are there any changes needed to the agenda? Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll consider the agenda approved and move on to approval of the minutes. And these would be the minutes from our last meeting, December 17th, 2025. That's regular meeting number 69. Does anybody have any changes for these minutes? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from 12/17?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I will second that motion.
All right, thank you, Mike and Ron. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from December 17th, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I heard Paul, hands are up.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. And while I was talking, I see Phil Sisk joined us from Mission Critical. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. I'm still back in 2025 with my mute button. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. And I see Jim Mack has also joined us. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
All right. So we've gotten through approval of the agenda and the minutes, and we're now going to hand it over to Dom for project updates from Televate.
Okay, thank you, Barb, and good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year to all. As far as project activities, the task force, of course, completed a very busy year last year, developing a set of recommendations for all the key areas that were provided in the system planning report by MCP. A summary of those recommendations was provided to the Vermont legislature in early December, and we have been monitoring for feedback on those. And we also have been working with, Televate has been working with the task force chairs to develop a more detailed description of those recommendations, which we plan to have a draft of next week for task force review, with the intent of having that available later this month for submission to the legislature. And that's primarily our activities over the last few weeks.
Okay. Excellent. And I know we talked about having some drafts of that more detailed description kind of circulating initially with the chairs and then to the full task force over the next 10 days or so, right?
Yes, over the next few days, yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Any questions for Dom? All right. Next agenda item then is Dan Bates's presentation of the CAD Valcor RFP process. And I should start right off by saying Dan and I had this discussion the other day that we should stop calling it the Valcor RFP because that's very vendor specific. So really what it is the records management RFP. And Dan is going to go over what that process looks like for the Department of Public Safety. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so Barb, I'll say this is hardly a presentation other than just an update in terms of where we are. We discussed in this meeting in the past that the current records management system, otherwise known as Valcor, is up for the RFP process starting this year to replace or update that contract. That process from the state side will be led by the Agency of Digital Services, and their intent is to build sort of the parameters of what is needed in anticipation of an RFP process. So they will lead a group of stakeholders. The original intent was to lead a group of state stakeholders to say, this is what the requirements of the system are, this is what the capabilities are, and therefore let's put an RFP out that will solicit proposals that would match those needs. As you know, right now, Valcor is primarily only a records management system and is not really fully utilized as a CAD system and is primarily for law enforcement and not used by fire, EMS, and other first response agencies. I spoke to the Agency of Digital Services and our folks on our side to say that as this task force ponders the notion of adding a CAD system in its current recommendations that we're putting forth to the legislature as we speak, it would only make sense that we include that CAD capability in this process, either as a parallel process or as a single process. And I think it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of both of those. Given that we don't really have assured funding for it, but it makes sense that if we're going to put a proposal together, that we include those capabilities. So as we're just kicking off the process, it actually is a fairly easy thing to do to include the appropriate stakeholders in the design process. And by design, I mean, what are the capabilities? What do we need it to do? What are the things that we want in terms of an outcome? So in addition to the planned stakeholders that will be included already, which is, the primary Valcor users, we'll include whatever we feel from the task force are necessary to get us to the place where we can understand the outcomes that we're looking for. So I would anticipate that that's members of task force leadership, probably representation of the other first response agencies that would use this, and then a representation of the dispatch stakeholders that would, go into that sort of thing as well. It will be an open process. It's not intended to just simply replace Valcor or simply update the contract. Although, as I've mentioned before, I think there is great consternation stirred among our law enforcement partners when we say we're going to replace Valcor. So I just have said all along in that process, that is the RFP process, that we just want to be clear that we're not necessarily looking to change things on its head, but rather just to take a look at what we need and what will best serve us in that need in the end. So that process is kicking off right now. I think we have time to match up whatever stakeholders we want to be included in that process. And that's just a matter of coming up with an appropriate list. And then we can take part in that guided process.
Okay. Do you know, so kicking off right now, and what is ADS saying is like the timeline for when there'll be an RFP on the street? Do we know that yet?
I don't know that off the top of my head, Barb. It's, I think it's like in a year, this next year is dedicated to that process, but I want to double check that before I said that for sure.
Don't know
It's
the
not like in the
specifics.
next 2 months or anything.
Right. And I had a couple questions for you, but I'll open it up to other task force members first. Are any questions for Dan on the RFP process? Paul, go ahead.
Well, just in follow-up to what you just asked, do we know when the current contract with Crosswinds is expiring?
I think it's the end of the year, Paul,
Okay.
but I'm not, again, I'd want to double check that before I said that for sure.
Okay. And did I understand you right to say that ADS is going to lead this stakeholder outreach?
Agency of
And-
Digital Service. Well, I mean, they're leading
and-
the process, if you will.
Okay. Okay. I was
They're
gonna
they're
say,
not
I mean,
identifying stakeholders. They're simply the project managers in terms of how we develop this RFP.
Okay, but they won't be the ones meeting with fire chiefs and
No,
ambulance
well, I
crews,
mean,
asking them questions about things that they don't really know what they're asking.
no. I mean, other than the process, no. I mean, they'll be the ones that sort of lead. Uh, More than likely, their project managers will design how we're going to ask the questions. But I think in terms of the informed process, the technology capabilities, that sort of stuff, that's purely going to come from stakeholders.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. So what you mentioned, as the task force ponders whether or not to push forward with this recommendation for the statewide CAD, there's of course, there's the question of, is there any money, right?
Well, and that's what I mean. I don't mean to imply that we're pondering whether we're going to recommend it or not. I think the pondering is whether or not we'll be able to do anything, given legislative intent.
Right, exactly. But the records management RFP is going to proceed whether or not the task force has the CAD requirements or asks to have the CAD requirements included in that.
That's correct.
Okay.
It kind of has to, right?
Yeah, unless you're going to do like an extension or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
okay. Are there any elements of CAD requirements in the existing contract, or were there any in the RFP that resulted in the Valcor contract, or was it all specific to records management and how they're using it as CAD just kind of evolved?
Yeah, I don't know, Barb. I think that depends on how you define CAD, and I think what you see in this process is a pretty loose definition of a CAD system. I think what we're talking about and the CAD system that we're suggesting for the other first responders is much different than anything that's being utilized today in the Valcor system. But I cannot tell you, and I'm not a sophisticated enough user of the Valcor system or informed enough about the previous Valcor process to say what, if any, other elements of CAD capabilities were discussed or included in that process. Certainly,
Okay.
we could find out.
It might be nice to see the original RFP, even, to see what was being thought about then. But that's just a thought. Okay, so where does this conversation go next, right?
Yeah. I think to answer your question, I think what we should do is decide, what the task force that is, should decide what stakeholders we would recommend be included in this to get to the ends that we wish to get to. So, and by the way, the ends that I think we need to get to is what would the elements of a CAD be based upon our recommendation? So who needs to be included in that conversation? What organizations need to be represented in that conversation? And then we can include them in whatever ongoing meetings we begin to build in this process.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute here because Phil Sisk has his hand up. Phil, go ahead.
I was just gonna, I say, make a suggestion. In terms of the industry, the functionality that is present in the current system is generally referred to as more like a call for service module. It does a good job of capturing information related to a dispatch event, but it's not, at least by what the industry defines, a CAD system. And I might give some thought to kind of using those two different terms. You're looking for a full-fledged, robust CAD system as opposed to a call for service module. Another term, I only bring this up because of the geographic closeness. In the state of New York, they would use the term blotter. I don't know if you've ever heard, that's a very popular term in New York for systems. They talk about, they have a blotter system, and it's like the old police blotter. We just like, we just made record of the information that we use to dispatch, where we sent out a response. So just a suggestion to think about it if you're looking for a nomenclature that could distinguish between what, the functionality that would resonate with the industry.
Okay,
So,
that's helpful. Thank you. Great. Okay, so back to Dan's suggestion that we identify what stakeholders should be included. Are we ready for that conversation? I would suggest the dispatch group there, Liz Tracy's group, Emergency Dispatch Association, or a representative from.
Yes,
And who?
I agree with that. And I think that if Dan had mentioned that the current Valcor users group will be involved, so that will cover law enforcement quite heavily, I think. So I guess I would turn to Ron and Michael to say, are they comfortable, or are there other people from their disciplines that they would want to bring in to participate? Or are they comfortable being the sole representatives for fire and EMS themselves?
On the fire side, I think we'd have to have the discussion to see who's the best qualified to have that discussion. One of the things that I can say is that in my trekking about the world, I agree that there are some law enforcement stakeholders who are entrenched in Valcor and are going to dig in their heels, but that is not across the board the sentiment. There are probably an equal number of Valcor users who would ditch it in a second for something better.
Absolutely.
So
maybe
and to be clear,
maybe,
I'm not a Valcor apologist. I'm not trying to defend whether
No,
it's
I
valuable,
wasn't.
good or bad, one way or the other. I just don't want to build fights before we get to a fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, where I was going with this is I think that we should look at it closely and identify, people in law enforcement who are for and against it, so that it's not stacked one way or the other. That's the fair way to go about it. Even from a law enforcement perspective, having multiple sets of eyes on the issue to make some rational decisions about what's really best for them, because there's always two sides. It's we've always done it this way, we don't want to change, and the people who recognize that there might be a better way. And I think that we need to get people in law enforcement who are willing to have that conversation from both sides of the issue, so that they too get a fair shake and they get what's best for them. We know that Valcor does absolutely nothing for fire and EMS, so the argument on that side is very, very clear. But I think that we need to make sure that we have law enforcement looking at this objectively.
So one of the things that popped into my mind just now, and I may be being very naive and very Pollyanna-ish here, but we're really not debating for or against Valcor, I would say, at this point. What we're trying to do is identify the requirements for a records management system, which would in probably large part be based upon user experience, right, with the current or any other system. But we're trying to identify, or DPS will be trying to identify what is needed. And then it's up to those companies to propose something that meets or doesn't those requirements, and then those evaluation decisions are made. So I think it's good to have a placeholder for all those differing opinions, but I don't think it's the priority right now.
Or at least not our priority.
Right. Go ahead, Paul. Tell me how naive I'm being.
No, not at all. No, you're absolutely right. I just think something Ron said just sort of stirred my mind that I don't know if this is what he was inferring, but if so, he's correct that the Valcor users group is primarily going to be made up of Valcor fans, people who think it's good and have been involved in massaging it over the years to become what it is currently. So it probably would be good to include, for example, not necessarily that it has to be Hartford, but somebody from Hartford, because Hartford intentionally, when 98% of the law enforcement in the state jumped on board with Commissioner Sherling and Valcor, Hartford was the one agency that I can think of that said, we're not interested, we're going to stay with the old Spillman. So maybe somebody from Hartford would be a good addition if they were willing.
Yeah, and actually you're making a good distinction. Like I don't mean to minimize the input that Ron was having. It would be important to know that people who are not fans of the current system, what need is not being met, right? That could be incorporated into a future RFP. So, all right, I made a note about Hartford.
I think we should temper. I want to be clear that I don't know that we're going to have the task force is going to have an expectation on that should have an expectation on managing this overall process from the law enforcement perspective. I think we should focus our efforts at what is needed to fulfill the recommendations for the CAD system augmentation. Now, I think we can certainly have some input, but I think we're starting to dip our toe into an area here that is not very clearly defined in our role. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad place to go, and I'm not necessarily arguing against it. I just want to be very careful that we're not trying to get into too much of what law enforcement needs to be included in this process and who does or who doesn't, because I'm not sure that's really what our charge is here.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that makes sense too. All these finer points being put on it. Really, the task force concern is not the records management system, right?
Well, not directly, it's not. But you do have fire service, which has their national reporting standard. Valcor does a great job as far as NIBRs, but it does nothing for the fire service in their national reporting standards. And it doesn't work well with sirens. So we do have to look at the EMS side.
Yeah. Okay. We really need to have
Yeah,
these
I think there's
larger
overlap, and
conversations.
I don't want to dismiss the notion that there's a lot of overlap here. There is. I just want us to be a little careful in terms of sort of how we approach this.
Okay. So we're going through a list of stakeholders to identify, and we've got the Dispatch Association, the current Valcor user group. Dan, you said by default will be involved. Hartford PD or Hartford Emergency Communication System, your Emergency Communication Center folks.
Burlington would be another good one because they're actually using two systems simultaneously. They're doing the Tyler system and the Valcor system.
Oh,
Tyler,
okay.
they're using that for their fire EMS.
Got it. All right. Any other Dom, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. Televate in some of our meetings have identified some additional potential contributors to this process as well. We can forward you those in email, 3 or 4 people that were recommended.
Okay, great. Okay, that sounds good. Sorry, I just blew my notes away from my screen. Let me get them back. All right. So we'll watch for those, Dom. And Dan, I guess everything will kind of funnel through you as far as contacting, coordinating.
Yeah, I'll there's no meetings announced yet or any process pieces yet. But what I will do is take whatever recommendations we have from the task force perspective, pass them on to the group that is running this, that is ADS. And then I would imagine there will be some contemplation about how we construct this process. Again, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go. I want to be clear that we're going to have to run this through DPS as well. There's a piece of that included in this process. But yeah, so I'll keep everybody posted.
Yeah, and there's been discussion along the way. I think we talked about this on Monday about how an RFP could be developed that requests a response on a CAD system, an RMS system, a combined system, both of those functionalities. And then you always have the option of, we'll award 0 to 3, 0 to 3 contracts out of this. So
Well, it's
I
not,
would keep open all our options.
yeah, it's not,
But that's probably a discussion for a little further down the road.
it's not totally dissimilar from when we went out for the RFP that resulted in Mission Critical. We said we wanted somebody who was going to present us with options.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right. We will have to talk about how we make sure. So maybe one of the stakeholders needs to be like the IT manager for the 911 board, right? What is required for these things to integrate? Because I will not be the one to talk to about that. So, all right, I'll put that down. Jim, you're not supposed to laugh so hard at Anyway, I made a note on that too. Okay. Anything else on this topic for now? Anything else we need to be doing right now to advance the conversation? Okay. Okay. Well, Dan, I'll be interested to know, like, when there starts to be dates put around all these things, that will paint a clearer picture for me. But
And I'll for next time, I'll try to get some clarity on the contract and the expiration dates and stuff like that. I know they're anticipating it with a great deal of wiggle room here, so it's not gonna change anytime soon. But I'll try to get those formal dates for next time.
And when you say ADS, you mean the ADS liaisons that work directly with the Department of Public Safety, right? Or is it
Well,
some?
there
or
is
it
no more the way they've restructured. There is no more like public safety ADS. That's all ADS. They've assigned a
Okay.
project manager out of their central office.
Okay. Okay.
But that said, the people who have historically worked with public safety will certainly be included in this because they're the ones who have the most historical knowledge around this project.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we will stay tuned as it develops. Okay. So next on the agenda is public comment. We're at public comment already. Anyone, Chris, Dean, Phil, any comments today?
Nothing to add for me, Barb. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. Sounds like nothing for public comment this time around. Is there any new business for today? Okay. Well, that's easy enough. Our next meeting then.
Barb, I do have something, and I apologize.
Okay.
Maybe I should have covered it during project updates.
That's okay.
But I will mention at one of the recent meetings in December, Televate did present an overview of the LMR concept design that has been recommended, consistent with the recommendations from the Tier 2 committee. And there was some discussion about looking further into that further in terms of the predicted coverage in various areas. And one area that we focused on was Addison County. And there was some discussion of looking at comparing what the proposed approach would provide in terms of coverage compared to what currently is available in Addison County. And to that end, we have gathered some information, and that's, I believe, why Dean has attended today. He's provided some of the information in terms of existing tower locations in use. Given the task force wants us to continue to look at that, we have the information necessary to move forward.
Okay, great. So we'll expect that sometime along as the conversations continue, right?
Yes, yes.
All right. And thank you, Dean, for helping out with that information gathering. It's appreciated.
Not a problem.
Okay. Anything else under new business? Okay. All right, good. Well, then we'll move on to the final item, which is to confirm the next meeting date and adjourn. So we are on the books for January 21st at 11:15. And if there's nothing further, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
I will second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning for today, raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
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 All right, we are out of here then. That was quick, and we'll keep an eye out for any drafts that might be circulating on the bigger report to the legislature. And other than that, we'll plan to see you all in a couple weeks. All righty. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody
Bye.
have a great day. Happy New Year.